Good day, dear students. This is the second recording, and whereas the first recording focused on learning units 1, 2, and 3, today we are only going to focus on learning units 4, 5, and 6. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the recording. Once again, I've also shared this information when we did the first recording. My contact details. What I want to urge you to do is to save my email address, because when you do the take-home exam, which is scheduled for the 27th of October, and you experience any technical difficulties, you need to send me an email the moment when you have a challenge. So please make sure that you have my email address on the 27th so that you can notify me as soon as you experience a difficulty. But I'll speak about the take-home exam a little bit later. So the outline of the module, like I've mentioned, today we're just going to focus on learning units 4, 5, and 6. So in terms of the broad learning outcomes, as it is stated in your study guide, we've already addressed children's literature, the definition thereof, the identification and classification of literature genres, and how to analyze genres for the use of language teaching, and how to teach children from diverse backgrounds. So today we're going to more and more focus on how to use children's literature to explain social issues, and how to use stories to teach languages, writing skills, and comprehension. Before I do, I just want to give you a quick feedback in terms of your assignments. Assignment 1 and assignment 2, you should have received your marks. We've marked all, so no student that's submitted should be without a mark. Tutorial letter 201 is available on the module site under official study material. So please go and download tutorial letter 201, because together with your study guide, you would need tutorial letter 201 that gives feedback on assignment 1 and 2 to prepare for the examination. Then by now you've also received your examination timetable. As I've said, your exam for CHL2601 is scheduled for 27 October. It's a 6-hour paper. You're going to start at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're going to write until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'll share some more information on the very last slide. I want to share with you problems we've experienced with the submission of assignments, late submissions. Too many students came long after the due date with long explanations on why they could not submit on time. If you know you're going to have an issue in future, remember this for in future, when you're going to experience or you are experiencing a problem, you may be sick or whatever the reason may be, please notify your lecturer before. Don't wait until a month after the due date before you notify your lecturer that you had a difficulty or a challenge, and therefore you submitted late. So too many of you submit your late assignments via email, and this is my concern now. For the exam, which is an online take-home examination, no email submissions will be accepted. So make sure that you are ready on the day of your exam. When you submit, also a lot of you had submitted read-only files. And because we're only doing marking, online marking, we can't mark read-only files. So when you save your work for the exam as a PDF, also make sure it's not a read-only file. Then also, a lot of students submitted incorrect assignments. It's because you don't name your, so that it will be easy for you to find the correct document when you upload. And in every tutorial letter 101, we give you a naming convention. Please come into a good practice of naming your documents in a specific manner, so that when you look and browse for your document to upload, that you click on the correct document. For the exam, if you submit an incorrect document, you will be marked absent for the exam and you'll receive 0. So I really want to urge you to name your documents properly and upload the correct document. Also, do not wait until the last day, an hour, to upload assignments. It's too late for this year, but keep in mind for next year. For the exam, if you miss that 6-hour window opportunity to download your paper, write your exam and upload again, it's a 0 for you. So please be on time with submissions. Now I want to quickly go to the presentation of the day. Learning units 4 and 5 and 6 are the ones that we are going to deal with today. So learning unit 4 is how to use children's literature to further language and cognitive development. Every chapter or learning unit starts with concepts that you need to know. And I'm going to spend some time discussing Piaget's theory of cognitive development with you. And we're going to spend some time looking at critical thinking skills and how to develop vocabulary. Now, in terms of cognition, you need to be clear if we talk about cognitive development, exactly what cognitive development is. So these are the cognitive skills. So when you use children's literature, it's not just, sometimes you'll read a story just for the sake of a story and you're going to have fun reading it together. But ultimately throughout, the aim is to enhance learners' ability to pay attention, to remember, to process the information, to analyze, to judge and evaluate information, because you're going to ask them questions requiring them to do so. Reasoning, problem solving and decision making. And you're all familiar with Bloom. And in your study guide, there's a whole section dealing with the 6 levels of comprehension. And by getting into the practice of asking questions, not just what was the color of her dress or why was she angry, but to really get them to judge and evaluate and to analyze and to reason. And then only will you succeed in develop cognitive thinking skills. So getting to cognitive development and Piaget per se, there was a question in assignment 2, which was a 20 marks question where you had to give the milestones in each stage and indicate how children's literature can be used to develop the cognitive skills in that specific stage. So in the sensory motor stage, many of you have mentioned these, but when you start with your discussion, it's clear that you lost fact that it's children from birth to the age of 2 years that we are speaking about. So you will not read them love stories in this stage because it's very inappropriate. We are talking babies to 2 years. So they would have limited language. They're only now focusing on or starting to remember or learning new words and concepts. So the language is very limited. The way children learn in this stage is through exploration. They use movement and they use their senses. So sensory motor says it all. Sensory, senses, motor, movement. They move around a lot and everything is being touched and put into their mouths, and that's how they learn. They learn through their senses. Attention span is very short. They need to move. So you probably will battle if you want to get a child to sit on your lap and you want to hold him down by force and to read him a longish story. That won't happen. So the kind of books in this stage that will be appropriate for young children from birth to 2 years is baby books. And with baby books, I mean those books with thick carton pages, probably only 2 or 3 pages. It's easy to handle for them. It's small little books because their hands are small, motor skills aren't that well developed yet. Rounded corners, so safety is of concern here. They must be able to chew the book, so non-toxic material. Toy books are the books that with pop-ups or that allows their senses to be enhanced and develop, where they can press to hear the dog bark, or to hear the cow moo or whatever. So it's very interactive kind of books. It's more about learning concepts, learning words, and touching. Taking the books, like I've mentioned here, books on the go. Taking the book to the bathroom. It's these plastic little books, also just 2 or 3 pages. It's plastic, it goes into the bath. And by providing babies these kind of books, books becomes part of their normal everyday life and normal everyday routine. Reading on the lap allows learners, especially when they're very tired and you read to them, they're already tired, they would love to sit on your lap in the safety of your arms. It's a bonding opportunity. They would be comforted by your voice and by your heartbeat. And by doing so, you at the same time establish a reading routine, which is also very important. In the pre-operational stage, which spans 2 months, what you would see now is rapid language development. So books and lots and lots and lots of talking is very important for language development, forming new words, vocabulary, concepts, development of memory. They're exposed to so many things. They're learning so many things. They need to memorize that, to remember it. They have a very, very active imagination. They tell you the most weird and wonderful stories. It's normal. The imagination is very active. You need to stimulate it. Don't tell them, no, there's no lion in the street. So the imagination is really wild and fantastic at this stage. Symbolic understanding is where they do begin to understand that when you present them with a picture, it's not the real thing. It's just a picture representing the real thing. Therefore, in their play, you would see the same thing where they would use a broom as a horse. And they would play with that as if it's a real horse. Animism is where, for children in this stage, it's very much normal that animals can talk in stories. They love it. For them, it's just normal. And that's why there's so much love and fables and fantasy. Egocentrism at this stage is where the world is just centered around themselves and their own needs. And by reading them stories, you expose them to context and plots of everyday life, so that they can learn it's not just them that's experiencing this problem. Other characters experience the same problem, and this is how they've dealt with it, so they learn and move away from their own understanding, and also see how others deal with specific situations. They keep in mind that at this stage they do not yet understand cause and effect, but through reading stories and the kind of questions that you're going to ask and the prompting that you're going to do, in the end, in the long run, they need to learn cause and effect. So the kind of books that will be appropriate at this stage, still concept books, but as they start counting and learning alphabet, letters, emergent literacy, you will also need to include counting books, alphabet books. They love rhymes, especially action rhymes, and the repetitive nature of rhymes. So this is one of the best books that you can give them or read them as rhymes. Fables, magic, make-believe, fairy tales, fantasy is so important. Fables, because they love it that in a story it's normal that animals can talk, and even dead things can take on human characteristics. If you think of the story Cars, the cartoon picture or animated pictures where cars can talk, it's a dead thing, but it's got human characteristics. For them, it's normal, it's fine. So would love books and stories with themes that deal with real life events, because through the events in the story and the way the characters have dealt with that challenges, they learn how to deal with challenges in their own lives. In the concrete operational stage, 7 years to 11 years, so this is roughly grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. Logical thinking, more and more you're able to witness logical thinking. Abstract thinking and problem solving is not yet developed, but at this stage they learn rules and how to obey rules, play by the rules, and they love come and tell teacher who disobeyed rules. They become less egocentric, they become more aware of the needs of others, and they begin to learn about cause and effect. So in the stories that would speak to them would be fantasy, fairy tales, fables, myths, legends. And what they begin to love is stories with humor. They love it. Then simple thrillers, when you go to bed and you're scared at night, those kind of stories. Simple mysteries, and series like Secret 7, Famous 5, whatever kind of series there is, where the character is their own age. And they begin to explore into non-fiction stories as well, because they become aware and they become curious about the world and how the world works and operates. Apologies. So they would love to read and page through books that unlocks the mystery of the world on their level. Then the last stage, the formal operational stage, in your answers in assignment 2, so many of you, I could see that you are not aware that we're talking about adolescents and adults, because this stage spans from adolescence into adulthood. So if you think of yourself, these are the kind of cognitive skills you are able of: abstract thinking, logical thinking, how to use symbols and equations, how you can consider multiple variables when you are able of inductive and deductive reasoning. You can formulate hypotheses and you can understand concepts. So the kinds of stories you would love in this stage: adolescents and adults, obviously some series, murder mysteries, thrillers, horrors, crime, romance, non-fiction, and even historical fiction. So the kinds of stories that you would read from the age of 14, 16 into adulthood is quite different than the previous stages. So this sort of like also gives you feedback on question 4 of assignment 2. Understanding this is very, very important. There will be some questions in the exam on this, how to use Piaget. So expect something of this nature in the papers as well. Then when you do, remember the questions, the 6 kinds of questions where remembering is the most basic cognitive skill, where you just ask, can you remember what was the color of a dress? To more kind of like understanding, why was mom so angry when the dog barked? That kind of thing. Applying your knowledge, analyzing and evaluating. The information is not explicit in the story, but you ask, can you deduce from the story what season it was? And then they would really think hard and say, but they were swimming, so it must have been summer, although they don't say it in the story. But because they were swimming, you can deduce from the story that's the season. And then also to judge, do you think the way she had answered him was appropriate, or did it hurt his feelings? So kinds of questions where you judge and then creating. Now, keeping blooms in mind, as I'm speaking of blooms and the kinds of questions, you had access to a mock examination paper and we're in the process of giving feedback, and you many of you in the discussion groups have indicated to me that it's a very, very hard paper, because you're so used to, we're asking you recall questions where you just need to rely on information that you've studied and that you can just remember and recall. But now all of a sudden in the exam, we're going to focus on analyzing and evaluating and creating. So in the same manner, we are expecting this from you as students. From a very young age, you need to also take young learners from remembering, which is the most basic skill, up to analyzing, judging, evaluating, and creating on their level, obviously. Then building vocabulary. It's very, very important in Learning Unit 4. And here you see, it's kind of like a cycle. To learners, the bigger their vocabulary will be, the better their language skills will be. The bigger their vocabulary is growing and the better their language skills is becoming, the more they will love and crave stories. So it's kind of like a cycle that's just to the benefit of learners. And here you see, if a student A reads at home only for 20 minutes a day, how many words will they would have heard at the end of that year? And what their score will be on reading tests compared to another student that only reads for 1 minute a day, compared his vocabulary to a learner that reads 20 minutes a day. See the scoring in terms of reading tests. So it's really, really important to not just only use reading and literacy to teach the skill, but to really have learners love reading, because the more you love something, the more you will engage in that activity. So whenever, and this is especially important when you teach in a language that is different from the learner's home language, their vocabulary will be limited. So you'll need to spend lots and lots and lots of time on building vocabulary, because if there's no vocabulary and understanding, they won't understand basic instructions in class, they won't understand the content of whatever it is that you're teaching them. I want to move on to the focus of Learning Unit 5, which is oral presentation and creative writing. So you can use stories to develop language, because by the very nature of reading to children, you are going to develop language. But to not just stop it there, from reading, you've got to allow learners to explore writing, because it's very interactive in nature. Reading and writing, the one doesn't exist in isolation from the other one. And we're going to say something about first editional language as well. So if you read the CAPS home language and CAPS first editional language documents, obviously the department has adopted the additive approach, where in the foundation phase, the focus will be on learning in the home language and strengthening the home language, whilst at the same time you'll introduce a first additional language. And then I can't think of a better way in doing so than through stories. And the reason why I say so is when you read them stories, all children love stories, and listening to stories and learning through stories, they don't even realize they're learning. So it's a non-threatening manner of learning. So multilingualism is kind of like the focus, in terms of our education system. So it's not just about one language, knowing one language, speaking one language, but using more than one, especially because we have 11 official languages. So an additive approach is very important. And even if the context of a story, like we have with the mock exam, the matatu, if you read about something and the concept that you're reading about is unfamiliar, you would create the context, you would explain what it is, but then coming back to home language, first additional language, diversity, you would ask, what would you call this in your language, in your culture, so that we become more inclusive in our approach when we use language and when we teach. So in terms of language development, learning unit 5, there's no information on Noam Chomsky, but you can go and read up on Noam Chomsky. He's sort of like the father of language theories, and Chomsky believes that language is innate. So every single individual is born with an ability to learn language, whereas it's not true with reading. Reading is a skill that must be taught. And the reason why language is innate and all individuals or humans can learn language is because we have a learning, or what Noam Chomsky refers to as a language acquisition. So children have an innate knowledge of the basic grammatical structure that is the basis to all language. If you listen to babies learning to speak, regardless of whether that baby is German or Afrikaans or Sesotho or Setswana or Zulu or whatever language, babies of a certain age, their language utterances sounds the same. And it develops from there when they start building the vocabulary and the language structures of their own mother tongue. But the critical period to learn language is basically, well, they say from 3 to 10 years, but it's basically from birth to 10 years. From birth, we are exposed to hearing people speaking, not making much sense of it, but it's very important that you pick up on the music of the language, so to speak, of your home language, of your mother tongue. But within the ages of 3 to 10 is the critical period to learn language. And the pattern of how children learn words and vocabulary is that they learn nouns before they learn verbs and adjectives. So they would probably say something like mine or cat before they would say my book or my give me or black cat, something like that. So all languages develops also according to Noam Chomsky in a particular pattern. So from language and listening and speaking, to allow learners to become creative writers as well. So, and you'll probably notice when you read stories to young children, once they become familiar with the story, they would probably draw the characters in the story, and from there they would take it even further. So you need to develop or give them a framework so that they basically understand what a story is and how to develop stories. And you've all learned this in school as well, where you look at the questions when, where, what, why, how, and these are the components of basically every story. And by just giving them this framework, they can start developing their own stories. And if they are basically still young, like grade 1, your writing framework that you give them will be very basic and very simple. So they will start with a why sentence, a where sentence, a what sentence, a why sentence. And as they become older, they will expand and become more creative in the kinds of stories within their stories. They will become more and more creative. So these are all just examples of story maps. Same kind of thing. What happened? When did it happen? How did it happen? Why did it happen? So you need to provide, you can't just give them an assignment and say, go and write your own story. You need to provide them a story map, because by doing so, a story's got a plot, it's got a context, it's got characters, it's got a setting, it's got many components, and throughout the story map you provide them with a framework to give you all that elements of a story. This is a very, very basic one, where you just indicate the characters of your story, the setting of your story, what is the problem, how did it happen, what is happening in your story, and come to a basic conclusion or a solution. I want to say something about the creative writing process. Then when you take learners through the creative writing process, know that writing is messy, and don't expect learners to produce a piece of writing within 30 minutes. The writing process consists of a pre-writing stage, a writing stage, a revising stage, editing, and publishing. So you need to allow for time that learners can plan, can produce a draft, can revise, can edit their own work, or edit other learners' work before they get to what we refer to as the publishing stage, or their final product. The very last unit, and then we're done, is learning unit 6, where you use children's literature to address social challenges. Now, it can be personal challenges like the death of a family member or a disability, even something silly like, I say silly, but something like getting glasses, an illness that you have to deal with, like Brenda has a dragon in her blood that deals with HIV and AIDS. Fears, fear of the dark, phobias, fear of spiders, that kind of thing. Social challenges addresses more issues such as poverty or bullying or discrimination or gangsterism or violence, and other kinds of social barriers that you may think of. And the question then is, how would you use children's literature to address these challenges, and when? Coming back to the curriculum, and you can typically do that by just reading them stories, or make it a theme in your life skills as part of life skills. So what I did basically was just go and Googled some books that are excellent resources to use, where you see the one book there, The Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark, deals with a fear of the dark. Then there's one, The Potty Train, that deals with babies being potty trained and the stress and the distress that may go with that. Getting a new sibling, the new baby, how to deal with the new sibling. I lost my tooth at that stage when they're 6, 7, how to deal with that. The Goodbye book that deals with the death of a loved one. So there are so many books and resources. There's Brenda Has a Dragon in Her Blood that deals with HIV, to deal with that. Lately there's one that teaches kids about COVID-19, what it is, what the virus does, and social distancing and that kind of thing. I Said No, that deals with keeping private parts private, that kind of thing. So there are so many books. You just need to go and Google and find appropriate resources. And if you don't have access, if you're in a part of the a township or wherever where you don't have access to books and libraries, let children start with the writing projects. Go through these writing stages and let children write stories. You'd be amazed by what they would come up with. Just keep in mind that when you address social challenges like, let's say, for instance, rape, that you deal with it in a manner that it is appropriate at the level of the child. We, in the foundation phase, are dealing with grade R learners, grade R, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, that the information that you give them at that stage is appropriate for their age. Exam guidelines. I've already alluded to the fact that you're going to write a take-home exam on the 27th of October, so there will be no more venue-based exams going forward in future. To do your exam, you will need access to reliable data. You would need a computer or any other device to download, and you would need to scan and then re-upload, submit back onto MyUnisa. If you fail to upload, remember that 6 hours is to get access to your exam paper, download, save it, and start working, and then also to make sure that you save in a PDF format and re-upload all within that 6 hours. There will be no second chance, no email submissions. I've warned you already, it's a high stakes assessment. And even when you do upload, you will be required to sign a declaration of honesty to say that it's your own work. And I've already, when I prepared you for the mock exam, I've indicated to you that the examination paper will be really testing your application knowledge and skills, or your ability to apply knowledge. There will be no copy and pasting of information. The questions are not phrased in such a manner that you will be able to copy and paste information. So there will be little testing of knowledge and information, greater focus on application. I will give you scenarios and case studies so that you can interpret the information and apply. Remember, coming back to Bloom's taxonomy, that's what we're going to assess, the higher order thinking skills. On the module site, under additional study material, I've published guidelines for online take-home examinations. Go download, go read it. Then in terms of the mock examination, if you've missed the paper, remember I've said it's available only one day to make you aware of the fact if you miss an exam session, you've missed it. So you'll need to get the paper from one of the students that downloaded it. Currently, we're giving feedback on MyUnisa on the module site. Under discussions, you're welcome to go and follow our discussions. Even if you have done the mock exam and you're not really publishing your comments and your answers there, please just follow the discussions, because you don't just learn from teachings or a study guide, but you also learn from one another. And the kind of feedback that students give really enrich may really enrich your knowledge. So the mock exam would have given you an idea of the layout and the type of questions that you can expect, and hopefully by now I've managed to calm your nerves with the mock examination. So the technical problems, by now, by doing the mock exam, you should have a pretty good idea in terms of the technical requirements. Were you able to download? Are you able to navigate MyUnisa? Have you access too late? Did you miss the opportunity? And I see that many students don't read, because once the paper was released, students immediately started asking questions on the discussion forums. Where do they upload? Where do they upload? And I've mentioned it many times. You don't need to re-upload your paper. You read and you understand the instructions. And from my side, that's that. All the best with your examinations, and remember to participate in the discussion forums where we give feedback on the mock exam. All the best for the exam. Thank you.